In 10 minutes or less, I will be discussing whether or not a normal human like you, not me because I'm a Saiyan, could live on Planet Namek from Dragon Ball Z. We will be covering 4 topics: the planetary system, the geology, the atmosphere, and the ecology, and discuss the scientific accuracy of our beloved Akira Toriyama. May he rest in peace. We have a lot to cover, so I'll try to make this as quick as possible.
Mad zooted, I got this bad thing I recruited.
So I had to sit down for this one. We're starting off with the most scientifically complicated bit. Planet Namek has not 1, not 2, but 3 suns, complicating our understanding of the Namekian solar arrangement. But not to worry, because I've spent hours working on this. Circumbinary planets, also known as Tatooine planets, are planets with multiple suns. This brings the question, how does the day-night cycle work? And which sun does the planet orbit? That's 2 questions, but you know what I'm trying to say. My initial theory was that the gravity of the 3 suns would tear the planet into pieces. Now, this would be the case if the suns orbited Namek, but in actuality, the suns are arranged something like this. So Sun A would be in the center, meanwhile suns B and C would spin around each other as they orbit Sun A. This is very similar to like Pluto and its moon Charon, or Charon, however you want to pronounce it. And as for which sun Namek would orbit, there are 2 options here. There's a P-type, in which Namek would follow both suns, or an S-type, in which Namek would only orbit one of them. Now, Toriyama didn't really give us a good visual of the axial tilt of the planet, so we're just gonna have to brush past this one. But he did say that Namek is in perpetual daytime. But looking at this a little bit closer, he's only half right about this. So like, here's the thing. We only ever see one half of Planet Namek, and this half we see in daytime all the time, no matter what. So, going off of this, I have concluded that Namek is what you would call a tidally locked planet. So, for any celestial body, it doesn't have to be a planet. For any celestial body to be tidally locked, that means that only one half is facing the sun, or one half is facing something. You can think of our real life moon, that's tidally locked with the Earth because we only ever see one half of the moon. It's the same thing here with Namek. Only one half of Namek is actually facing the sun, or suns in this case, which means only one half is in perpetual summer and the other in perpetual winter. Now, if you wanted to know what this would look like, you can just imagine the polar night in Norway, or the eternal sun, which is also in Norway. I have one more thing to add about the planetary system. Namek doesn't have a moon. And while like moons aren't technically make it or break it for the prosperity of life, it is responsible for a bunch of important things, such as maintaining the axis, oxygenating life through tidal waves, and stabilizing the climate. Life is still possible, but this is something to consider. First things first, and this is probably the most important thing right here. Namek has surface liquid water. This tells us so much about the planet, because this tells us that the surface temperature is between 0 to 100 degrees Celsius, which is roughly 32 to 212 freedom units. Because Toriyama designed Namek to be the opposite of the Earth, it's likely that Namek has a ratio of 71% land and 29% water. This means water is scarce, but it's still present, which means there's good chance for life. However, because it's the opposite of Earth, it's probable that Namek doesn't have tectonic plates, which is very important because that's how we got most of our volcanoes, and by proxy, a lot of our mountains too. You see, the reason why volcanoes are so important to us is because that's what makes us new land, and they release fertile soils, and they also release gases to maintain and create atmospheres and oceans. This is essential for life. The fact that there's no tectonic plates is kind of a red flag. However, the fact that there are mountains shows us that there is something here. So spoilers for Dragon Ball, but when Frieza brought genocide to Namek, we got a sneak peek at the lava underneath the surface. No, Namek doesn't have volcanoes, but there is a mechanism underneath the surface called mantle plumes, which are pipes of magma which erupt when there's an overwhelming amount of pressure. This mechanism is called interplate volcanism. And we have this in real life. It's Hawaii's volcano. These would explain how Namek has its mountains, how it has its land, and stuff. That's why it erupted into magma and lava everywhere whenever Frieza was just running rampant.
This got my back and that's for sure though. Sipping on.
Now we're moving on to the atmosphere. According to Bulma, the atmosphere consists of oxygen but doesn't elaborate further. It's likely oxygen rich, however, because Namek is full of plant life and water. That says something about its atmosphere right there. And speaking of which, it's going to be very humid and warm, so, I mean, sucks to suck, I guess, but hey, I gotta address the elephant in the room. The sky is green. And I really hate to say this, ladies and gentlemen, but this is just an artistic choice. There is no canonical explanation for this, other than the fact that Namek is literally supposed to be the inverse of Earth. There's nothing here to say. And as I've said before, having no moons leaves climate conditions unchecked and would therefore have wild seasonal changes. However, because Namek doesn't have seasons because it's tidally locked, these effects are null. Namek would also likely spin faster than Earth, but whether or not the centrifugal force would be strong enough to affect you is kind of a mystery.
I gave her realness and that's all she gon' get from.
And now, the ecology, ladies and gentlemen. The most prominent life force here are the Namekians, without a doubt. They are basically just humanoid slugs, and they reproduce asexually like sponges or anemones, or however you pronounce that thing, and photosynthesize to eat. So any food that you find on the planet, that's all yours, bro. They're also known to be friendly, so you can lower your guard around them. Maybe, probably. Other fauna would include stuff like dinosaurs, frogs, fish, birds, and giant oysters. However, you don't have to worry about getting eaten by dinosaurs because life here is just so scarce, you'll hardly ever run into one. And there is a considerable reason why. It is because around age 261, there was an event called the Namekian Cataclysm, where everything basically died, except for Guru, and he had to reproduce the whole planet by himself. And it sounds kind of lazy at first, knowing that everyone mysteriously vanished. But the truth is, this actually parallels a real-life mystery, because around the Permian-Triassic period, there was an event called the Great Dying, where 90% of all species died from something we don't know about. Some speculate astronomical phenomena, others speculate it's a large impact like a meteor or something. Others say it's like some sort of like global warming that happened. I think it was Frieza. Now, after speedrunning all these facts, did Toriyama do a good job, and can you survive? What's up, people? It's me after doing the research and editing and stuff. Now, onto my thoughts. I think for what it's worth, Toriyama did a pretty good job, surprisingly, of making a planetary system. I think my biggest problem has to be with like his day and night cycle. I think it's a little bit off, but it's not terrible. I mean, like, Dragon Ball has a history of retconning, so honestly, it's a very simple solution. Just give us a little bit more clarity on the day and night cycle. And also, I just wish he gave us more insight about the cataclysm and the green sky. There's absolutely nothing. The green sky is speculated to be caused by a microbacteria that's in the air. However, I can't really talk about that because it's non-canonical. Toriyama did absolutely nothing to tell us where that comes from or anything like that. These aren't really like, well, I guess they are complaints, but they're not like huge complaints. They're just more like nitpicks. I just wish he gave a more thorough system. But overall, I think he did a pretty good job, and you actually have a very decent chance of surviving. I'd give you about like a 75% chance of surviving. The first problem you're going to encounter is just dealing with all the sweat. It's very hot. It's very sticky. It's just tropical weather. That's going to be your first problem. And then your biggest problem is actually going to be finding a sustainable food source, because all the food on there's alien. You're gonna have to try and figure out what's healthy, what's not. And also, just there's not a lot there. Like, you can't really get meat from anywhere because there's hardly any dinosaurs or fish. So you're not screwed, but you're not amazingly well off. But if you actually found a way to domesticate and like trade and stuff, then Namek could very well be an Earth 2.0.